Not sure if I'm. So I'd like to introduce Amanda Lathrop. We are so excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So I'm Amanda Lathrop. I'm the owner of Lead Sheep Productions. I do video production work for small businesses, nonprofits, and families. And how I got into the family side is through my genealogy work. So I started this presentation on getting started in genealogy to help people get started and also for interest in my personal history business. And I do have a slideshow if I can share that. Make sure I can open it first. Play from the start. It is not. Can you guys see the getting started with genealogy? Okay, great. So first I'll tell you how I got started in genealogy. This rocking chair, I was raised by my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and her second husband. And this rocking chair was in our living room as long as I can remember. And one day I was sitting in it, and her second husband's dad, Grandpa Don, said to me, "Do you know that was my grandma's chair?" And I said no. And the kids all said yes, his kids. And he said her name was Anna Schinkel. And they all looked at him like, "What?" And he started telling stories about his grandparents. And I ran upstairs really fast, got my computer, and started putting it all into Ancestry while we could. And no one saw me for 3 or 4 days because I just got really into it. And I've got his, mine, and our family. So I've got 10 different families to research and just got down the rabbit hole in genealogy and have been doing it ever since. One caveat I always tell people before they start genealogy is to remember that our ancestors were real people who lived real lives. You're going to find out things that are going to shock you or things you didn't expect. I always give the example, my paternal grandmother, I was doing genealogy and I looked at my oldest uncle's birth date and her and my grandpa's wedding dates. And they were 2 days apart. And that shocked me. Not embarrassing. She was already gone at the time. I wish she would have felt comfortable talking about it and what that was like. She was only 16. But you're gonna find out things that are not what you think about your family or are gonna be shocking. So just be ready. Is that really what you want? Are you really ready and really willing to look things up? I always start with what you know. People like to go way, oh, I know my 15th great grandfather, from the 1500s or whatever. But start with yourself, start with your parents, your grandparents, anything you already know, even if you don't know 100%. If you've heard they were from the Midwest, if you know they were born about 1900, that's a starting point. So write down everything you know. And as Sandy mentioned, interviewing family members who might know is a great way to start too. And again, they might not know specifics, but every family lore is based in a fact. It might have changed, but it'll get you back to the facts. And then you follow your GPS, which is the genealogical proof standard. And this is, if you do become a professional, I am not a professional, this is what you have to do a big project and it is analyzed by these standards. A reasonably exhaustive search. And of course, people argue about what is reasonably exhaustive, but you've looked everywhere most people would look. You've done your homework, you haven't skipped over anything. You've collected and cited your sources, and then you've analyzed and correlated what is all of that information telling you and resolved any conflicts. A lot of times information doesn't match. It doesn't all line up nicely and perfectly. Again, real people, real lives. And then you arrive at a conclusion. Your conclusion could be that Minnie House is Arthur Lathrop's mother, and this is how you prove it. Some tips as you're doing this. Spelling doesn't matter, which I love because I'm a terrible speller. But it doesn't matter. Most people could not spell before the beginning of the century, right? And people certainly couldn't spell when they were coming over here with Polish names and German names. And so people just made them up. So I was always told that we were not related to Lathrops with the E at the end. Well, that's not true. Some Lathrops have E at the end, some don't. Some are Lothrop. It doesn't mean you're related or not related. It's just how they spelled it when they started worrying about spelling. And this picture is from Elmira, New York, which is right on the Pennsylvania border. And it is where my 5th great grandfather came from. And when you go there, there wasn't a lot of history, but everyone would tell me, oh, like Lathrop Road off the Hogback. Everybody, old, young, black, white, didn't matter. Oh, Lathrop Road off the Hogback. So this is me at Lathrop Road off the Hogback. Another tip is to know the history of that area. So knowing what groups moved there, when did they move there, what records were kept, where are they kept, what are events that happened in the area, like a courthouse fire or a war or a lot of different things. What events happened and what records might those have created, and then finding out where those records are. Courthouses, libraries, historical societies, museums are good places to start. But they're kept in different places and there's different records for each place. So that's a good place to start, is what's even could be there. Keeping track, people moved in groups. They didn't just, I mean, some people did, but most people didn't move off by themselves. They're not, again, real people, real lives. They moved with their ethnicities, they moved with their families, they moved with their neighbors. I once found where like a whole German village picked up and settled in New York. Like all the neighbors were the same neighbors that they had back in the old country. So if you're having trouble finding them, looking for those patterns. And there's actually a really good book called The 11 Nations, and it's about different groups and when they came and where they went and how America was basically formed through starting with the Spanish back in the 1400s. Also, what events might your ancestor have experienced? Were they alive during a war? Were they alive during a natural disaster, a pandemic? All of those things created records and will help you find your ancestor. Keep an open mind. So in Minnesota, in Uptown area, there always was a store called Lathrop Paint. And people would ask me if I was related to the Lathrop Paint Lathrops. And I would say, no, my family's from Wisconsin. Well, actually, my family came from New York to Rochester, Minnesota, and then moved back east to Wisconsin. And I think I haven't proved it yet, but I think Lathrop Paint was started by my 4th great grandfather's brother. So just keep an open mind. My family's from Wisconsin. You're not going to find records if you don't look elsewhere, and keep an open mind about where those records could be. A source. So if there's one thing I wish I knew back when I was sitting in that rocking chair, it was to cite your sources. A source is any means of information. So a source can be a story your grandmother told you. A source can be a book. A source can be a document. They call it vital records, birth, marriage, and death records. A source can be anything. Next slide. A person is only a source if they're recorded and you can go back to it, right? Me talking right now is not a source. The video that's recorded of this that you can go back and check something is a source. Birth, marriage, and death records, court records, land records are really great information. I found a lot of information through land records. Newspapers, written family histories, area and museum records, cemetery records, city directories. Those are all great sources for information. Where can you find sources? Online is a big one. Ancestry.com is the biggest. I would recommend, if you're on Ancestry.com, when you find documents, download them. Because you save them in Ancestry. If you stop paying for Ancestry, you stop being able to see those records. So make sure you download a copy to your computer and keep them in your files or print them off. I have boxes of printed stuff. Family Search is another good one. Family Search is run by the Mormon Church. And actually, a lot of these are out of Salt Lake City, you'll see. Google is good. I found stuff just Googling people's names. We don't think of that, but Fold 3 is military records. Newspapers online is really cool. I found a really cute picture of my maternal grandmother when she was in the Girl Scouts and she was like 11 in the local paper. Um, Library websites, historical websites, all those places have information online. In person, again, going to historical societies, going to libraries, going to courthouses, going to a relative's home. A lot of times it's the youngest sibling who inherits this stuff because they were home longer. So that's been helpful. Churches is another good place, museums. Remember, especially if you go, so a quick story. When you go to these places, especially libraries and courthouses, you're not always their first job. So I went to Mankato with my grandmother, and we wanted to look at land records. And there's a person who does land records now. Like she's doing deeds and all of this stuff now. And she just broke her foot. And so she was not happy to see us come and ask to go in the archives. And we were really polite. We waited our turn. We went back there and started looking, and we were having so much fun and laughing that eventually she was back there with us, laughing along with us and having a good time. But we respected that we weren't her first priority and she had other jobs to do. So just remember that if you're going to those kind of places. Always cite your sources. This is the one thing I wish I knew, as I said, because even if you're not going to publish or be a professional, I have spent days looking up something that I've already found because I didn't write it down. Or I have information that I found 2 years ago, and now I don't know where that information came from. I don't know how to go check it because I didn't write it down. So even for yourself, writing down where this information came from is very, very helpful. And will save you hours of, wait, what? What, how did I do this? Um, I, I took a slide out. In citing your source, the what, where, when, and where in. So, what page number is it on? Like as much information as you can to go back to it. Another thing when you're looking at sources is to stop. So usually you get a new source and you're like, oh my gosh, I found his mother's name. Like you're so excited, but stopping and asking what information is in that source. And so this is an example. It's I believe the 1900 census from Rice Lake, Wisconsin. For my second great grandfather, Frank Lathrop is the yellow line. His wife is listed as Cora. Son Arthur is my family. He had twins, Gertie and Grace and Sadie. And I was super excited on this because it was the first time I'd seen the name Cora. His mother. It's not his mother. If you look, Cora is 7 years older than Arthur. It's his second wife. If I had paid attention to what the birth dates were and what this is really telling me, I'd figure it out. This also, years later, I found explained to me what street they lived on. And I know that street in Rice Lake. It's written on the side. I've learned, found other family members living in the neighborhood around the corner, their neighbors. I found people they later married living in the neighborhood around the corner. It also tells you a lot of times if they can read or write, if they own their home, what their jobs were, how much they worked that year. There's a lot more information here than just names. So taking a moment and what is this source telling you? Evaluating your sources. So a lot of times sources will tell you different information. My best example of this is a relative. He on everything that we found, he was born March 23rd, 1876. I'm making up the year. And on everything, on his death certificate, on his gravestone, on everything he'd written in his life. But in the church baptism record, he was born February 2nd, or he was baptized February 2nd, 1875. A whole year earlier, he was baptized. Which is right. This one he's got 25 different records saying March 23rd, but he's baptized in the church a year earlier on a different date. So we evaluate that. Just because there's more does not mean it's correct. Did it happen close to the event? The closer something happened in time to the event you're looking at, the more likely I'd believe it. Is it a firsthand account? Is it written by somebody that was there? Assuming this baptism record was written by someone standing there in the church at the event. Did the person have a reason to lie? In the late 1800s, all women lie about their age. It's just everybody gets younger. They don't get 10 years older every census. They get like 5 years older every census. Is there a penalty for lying? A lot of times, if you're talking to a government official, you're going to tell the truth versus your neighbor. And did they just not know? So in the case that I told before about the gentleman with the birth date, both his parents died before he was 5. So he just didn't know. His siblings were like, "You're born last spring, a couple years ago." You know what I mean? And it really wasn't like, it's not like now where it's important and written down. He's probably born at home. So he didn't know. He wasn't lying. He just didn't know. Sources, the mini mystery. This is Arthur and Catherine Lathrop, my second great grandparents. And their daughter-in-law, my grandmother, told me that his mother's name was Minnie House. And everyone thought it was super funny because she thought it was funny at the like little house. But when I started doing research, I couldn't find it. All I could find was his stepmother from the other example, Cora. Couldn't find anything on Minnie. She was just completely missing. I searched everywhere I could think of. And he had married Cora. Frank had married Cora in 1896. So I was looking for a death record for Minnie before 1896. And then one day I got this, that Frank and Minnie had gotten divorced in 1896. I didn't even know you could get divorced in 1896. And I found this was sent to me. It's a newspaper article, and it was sent to me from the Dunn County, Wisconsin archives. They just emailed it to me. I think I sent them $5, but I remember seeing this and be like, "Oh my gosh, you could get divorced." And it opened up a whole new world of trying to find Minnie. What happened to her after this? And it took me years to finally find her because her maiden name wasn't House. That was the name of her first husband before she married Frank. And she went back to that name after they were divorced, not her maiden name. How I figured this out was by tracing her daughter. So if you can't find someone and you're having a really hard time, look for what we call the FAN, family, associates, and neighbors. Again, people did not move around through their lives in a bubble. They usually moved around with friends, neighbors, associates that they pop up with over and over again. So Minnie House, I had put her name into Ancestry. I can't even tell you how many times in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And she never came up. I was researching her daughter Sadie and her husband. They lived in Minneapolis when suddenly the name Minnie House, mother-in-law, popped up on the last line. And that's how I found her. I actually found her in a cemetery by Lake Calhoun, if anyone's familiar with Minneapolis, that I rollerbladed past almost every day when I lived over in Minneapolis. And there she was, right there. You could see her grave from the path, and I had no idea. And this is how I figured out that House was her first husband's name. This led me to that realization. Some tools that I use when I'm studying genealogy. My favorite tool is a timeline because it'll help you figure out what you're missing, where to look for records. If you're looking for a death record or you're looking for a marriage record before the kids were born, or in this case, this is for Arthur Lathrop. I had heard had an illegitimate son. I did find that is true. I have since through DNA proven that is true. And on his gravestone, it says he served in World War I, but I haven't figured that out yet. I haven't found any records for that. And his first son was born in 1918, so I'm not quite sure when those records would be, when he would have served in the war. But having this all laid out like this is a great way to also check if he's in two places at the same time. If a child is born but he is not there, that's kind of can be problematic. This helps you just organize everything and follow what's going on in their lives and where you might have holes and need to look into some things. The biggest tool people are talking about right now is DNA. Um, and two things I always want to say about DNA is to know that you get half your DNA from each of your parents. So you are half your mother and half your father. You do not have the same DNA as your siblings. You're not the same half. The only time that you have the exact same DNA as someone is if you're an identical twin. But people always think that one sibling was tested, we're good. No, because you could get a different half of that parent. So siblings can be as little as I think it's 12% related. Full siblings, because they get different pieces of their mom and dad. You are 50% of your parents. You are not necessarily exactly 25% of your grandparents. Again, it depends on what half you got. So there's room for variation in this. Privacy. If you test through a private company, your DNA is private. There was a big uproar a couple years ago because law enforcement agencies realized they had this wonderful new database of DNA to put criminal DNA up against. And they were solving years old cases with this. It's really fascinating how they do it. And people got upset. They thought their DNA was being given to law enforcement. It's not. They're taking the unknown DNA and starting a new profile and comparing it to yours, but the law enforcement doesn't have your DNA. You can do some, there's some nonprofits doing DNA like GEDmatch. Those are not private. You're putting your DNA out there for anyone to go up against to see. So like I said, you get 23 chromosomes from each parent. So this is a multiple one, but you don't necessarily get the same half. So you can see in this third row, these kids have different amounts of red from their this be their father, right? And red, so from their grandfather, they have different amounts of DNA and different pieces. Does that make sense? So the biggest thing for that is don't think that you don't have to test your siblings. Because you could, that can really help because your siblings might have gotten a different piece that helps you to solve a mystery. Most people do DNA to find out what they are. So the ethnicity. Am I Scottish? Am I German? A thing to understand is that what they're doing is they're taking your DNA and they're comparing it to people who live in those countries now. Right? They don't have your ancestors' DNA. So they're comparing it to people now. So Ancestry has updated a lot. And as they've updated, ethnicity amounts have changed. I went from no German, which really surprised me because my grandmother was full German, to now I'm about 25% German. As they started testing more people and they started testing more remote villages and they got a bigger reference sample, they're being able to compare it and you're showing up now. But before, if they didn't test your village, you might not come up as being that ethnicity. Also understanding the history. So I first came up more British. Well, Anglo-Saxons, the Saxons from Germany invaded Britain. So my DNA further back was showing up as in Britain now versus more Saxon German DNA. Does that make sense? So understanding the history of these regions. Another one, my sister, my half-sister, her father is McGee, which is very, very Irish. She comes back mostly Norwegian. Well, the Vikings at one time invaded Ireland. So that's where her family did come from Ireland, but first they came from Norway. And people moved a lot more than you think. We tend to think people, the Italians, Sandy was talking about Italians. The Italians went back and forth, but because they were coming when steamships were available. So the Italians went back and forth a lot. They didn't just come once. You'll find multiple entries for them coming back into the United States. Um, I think this city is fun. It's fun to know I'm Scottish. I made a joke about watching Braveheart again. It's fun to know I'm German. But what I love is the cousin matches. So when you go into the DNA, they will match you with people and they will tell you approximately what percentage you match. And now they're starting to be able to tell you if it's your mother or father, based on the DNA. And they'll guess how you're related. If they have a tree, they'll tell you like you have these names in common, or you're probably first or second cousins. This really helped me. I had an ancestor named Mary Lynch. According to her obituary, she was from the County Kerry in Ireland, where 60% of the population has the last name Lynch, and every first daughter is named Mary. So finding Mary Lynch in the County Kerry was never going to happen. So I kind of given up. And then one of my DNA matches sent me a note and this picture. And that is my second great grandmother, Mary Lynch, with this woman's great grandfather. And he was the youngest, possibly her son. There's a whole story there. And he had inherited all the documents, all the family photos. They knew where the house was in Ireland, the names of the parents that I never would have found in a paper trail. I just did not have enough information. And the name Mary Lynch and she was the oldest and had left home early, possibly because she had this illegitimate son. And had just didn't tell her kids who her parents were, didn't tell anybody anything. She didn't want anything to do with it. So I never would have found it without this DNA and this cousin match and all the information and photos she gave me. So now you found all this stuff, you found all this information. What do you do with it? I go the binder route. I have big binders. I have one for my dad's family, one for my mom's family, one for a step family, and I put it in sleeves by generation. A lot of people do folders, so physical folders or folders on your computer for each generation. You can keep it in ancestry.com. I have everything in ancestry.com, but once you stop paying for it, you no longer get access to the documents. Your tree is still there, your people are still there, but you can't go into the documents unless you're paying. You can get Family Tree Maker, which looks a lot like Ancestry. I think they might be the same company. And then you can download everything into it on your computer. It's a software. But keeping it organized is important. So I have 2 boxes over here that are just everything I threw in as I went on these trips. And someday I'm going to go through it, but I wish I had been better at keeping everything organized and what goes with whom and the different generations. And then you want to share it. Again, I like the binders because you can share a binder. You can make a copy of it and give it to everybody. A lot of people write books, or what I do is video production. So I produce videos. I interview people about their lives. I take the photos, the documents and information, sometimes family heirlooms, and create a video with the person explaining. And I think that's more interesting because you get the stories. Like, it's great that my great grandfather was Arthur Lathrop, but so what? The stories of his his life though, how he grew up, how his parents got divorced, what that would have been like, went to the war. He had 5 sons. He also had an illegitimate child. Just all this stuff about him I have a letter he wrote to his wife when she was in the nursing home. Like, those things are more interesting than just names and dates. Let's play. Oh, I can play this. Let's see. Maybe.
after the war, there was no option, not very many options. And so Mom said to go because well, she knew Arlie Huntz was there, and her sister and her brother were there, and cousins. So she knew you can have a good life in America. So it was hard for them, but they were so totally unselfish, was, yeah. And so I remember I got on the train. Mom and Dad went with me to the next town on the train. And I had to go all the way up to the Holland, anyhow. Holland, on the train. And I met people on the train. That was fun. I met a grandma with her grandchild. And I met a young man, Reinhold Meyer. And that was his second time to America. He probably was just home from, you know. And so we were in the same compartment of the train. We were always together on the ship. They have said, let's just stick together. So we had our meal at the same table all the time. And we heard some people say, oh, what a nice family. Grandma, granddaughter, and husband and wife. Yeah. So I had a wonderful time coming to America. I really did coming that trip, There was a party every day, There was wonderful food. Oh my goodness. I should have gained, but I didn't. It was very, very, very nice.
Says one of my clients, she was born in 1929 in Germany as Hitler was coming to power, and remembers him talking on the radio and tells just amazing stories of the American troops coming in. And then she moved to America because she couldn't do anything in Germany, and she was very, very shy, but really enjoyed it. And her family now has these memories. And whether you do it with me, you do it with someone else, you get your cell phone out and record your family. I think it's a great way to capture those stories and share them with your family. So what are you leaving your descendants? Journals are a great way for people who don't want to be on video. I created one. I'm actually sold out of them right now. But for a client who didn't want to be on video. So I took all the questions I normally ask and created a journal. But there's lots. If you go to ancestry.com and look for life story journals, you'll find some. Books. This is Angela again. I created a book of photos and stories that goes with the DVD and then the videos. Does anyone have any questions?
You made me think of a couple things, Amanda. One was, they're both kind of with some of those DNA tools.
Yes.
So I think it's called My 23 or 23andMe and Ancestry. Are they private?
Yes, both of those are private.
And then you talked about how they get better information. Do you have to retest yourself?
No. No, they will re-update. So it's what they're comparing. It's not your DNA that's changing, it's what they're comparing it to. So they will update. Every now and then you'll get a thing. You've got new updates.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
When I was in Minnesota, I was asked by a family in Southwest Minnesota from Belgium originally.
Oh, cool.
If I could help them translate the old letters from Grandpa.
Oh, cool.
And it's super cool, but it was a big box, and just translating one letter already, we had to do it together because the language has changed so much in the handwriting. And of course, the topics they talked about, like growing flax or things like that. Wait. and oh my goodness, Grandpa, are you sure you want to get married? But of course, the message was not like, hey, Grandpa, but, young man, are you sure about this? And the things like that. So it was really intriguing. And I was wondering, do you get questions like that? And what would you do? Because I just didn't have enough time in my day to help these people.
I would actually probably send them to the Genealogy Society. The Minnesota Genealogy Society actually has groups for different ethnicities. So that could probably help them get connected with people who have researched the old language, who have similar things and a similar interest in that, and could probably help them faster.
Oh my. Okay, good. Yeah,
I
that's a
don't know
great
that
tip.
they have
Thank
a
you.
Belgian. Do they have a Belgian interest group?
Well, it's there's two languages, right, in Belgium. So
Yeah.
I speak Dutch, and they had their letters in Flemish, which is
Yep.
a version of Dutch. So yes, I speak that language, but not how they spoke 110 years ago.
Yep.
But together we figured it out. We just sat down, had a cup of coffee, and went through a letter, and I'm like, okay, it could mean this, it could mean that.
Yeah.
And then they say, oh, but it must be, well,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
something like this because grandpa did so and so, and and it was really, really intriguing. It was just far too much time for someone with a full-time job and a family and this and that.
Actually, funny that you mentioned Belgium. I have a family friend from Belgium, from Antwerp, who helped me translate a letter from French. He speaks 5 languages fluently. It blows my mind. We're literally sitting at dinner and he's talking to his kids in Flemish, us in English, and my German exchange student in German, and not missing a beat.
Oh yeah.
So it still blows my mind.
Yeah, that can be mind-blowing. Thank you. Yeah.
So what was the name of that book? I know you said the 11th something.
The 11 United States nations. The 11 nations of the United States. I have it here.
Okay, I was gonna put it in the chat box.
Yeah.
The 11 nations of the United States and their cultures.
Yes.
Book.
I can look it up too. I don't have it here. A lot of my stuff isn't currently in storage. But yeah, it starts with the conquistadors coming up through Mexico and the southern United States, and why southern United States is different than Puritan New England, and it's just fascinating.
I can't wait to re-listen to this recording, Amanda. You've given so much information.
Well, so this is actually like an hour presentation, and I cut it. Like, you notice I'd get to the next slide and be like, wait, that's not the slide I was expecting. Like, I've cut it down to 30 minutes. So.
Well, let us know if you're going to be giving the hour-long one. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious about your business and your business model. So are you to do the research on their families and get these stories recorded? How do you, I know it can be a lot of work, and how far back do you go for people? And I mean, is there do you have plans on how much people spend, or how does that work?
So usually I'm not going that far back with my clients. So it's usually their story, and usually their parents and grandparents, what they remember. I have done a few, and I just charge hourly for the genealogy research, because it could be an hour, it could be 20. Like, it doesn't, and I never promise to find anything, because you never know what you're gonna find and what you're not gonna find.
Right.
But mostly my video work is mostly with a grandparent, telling their story and what they remember of the generations that came before them, and it's not a lot of research.
Right.
So this is Gail, Amanda. If you were just starting from scratch, where would you start?
Right
Because
down.
I've started with Family Search on the Mormon site.
Yeah.
And I've connected with cousins. Literally, I haven't seen in 40 years.
Oh, so
in
cool.
Wisconsin, they're in New York and in Colorado.
Yep.
So basically, I am the leader, and I have no clue what I'm doing.
Do you have a family tree on Family Search?
Yes, I have started one. And one of them has a brother that has done it on Ancestry.com.
Okay.
So I said, tell you what, guys, let's use Family Tree as the scratch pad, because it's free and we can all get in there, and if we're making mistakes, we can clean it up, and then you can put it back in the others and we can figure out where it is. Does that make sense?
That does. Actually,
Okay.
that's my biggest complaint with Ancestry. So I had put in possible parents for someone, but I have no proof of it.
Yeah,
And a bunch of people copied it over, and there's no way to put it in as this is just a theory. Like,
yeah,
they have a hypothesis button, but nobody looks at that. So now the wrong information has been copied over to all these trees.
right, okay.
I was just looking to see if I could find any information, but I think having a scratch one is a great idea.
Okay,
Always start with yourself and your parents and go backwards.
okay. And that's kind of what we did. We're all filling in what we know.
Yeah.
And then picking in the gaps, and they don't agree. We're off by a year or two, because like you said, especially the Irish in the late 1800s and the early 1900s scooched on their age one way or the other for various reasons.
Oh yeah, especially all the women. Like my second great grandfather, his name was Louis, and he was the oldest, and I believe his sister May was the next. But by the time they died, she was the youngest.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah, by quite a bit.
All right. Thank you. I just for the sake of time. Well, what's time, right? But thank you for trying to tell your story so quickly. I thought it was super engaging, Amanda, and I'm kind of I should really ask my dad what I can do. And this is just really cool. We usually wrap up our meetings with, or I do, I like to do, and Sandy was like, hey, Sandy has been an amazing chairperson. Thank you for that. So thank you. But we wrap up our meetings with a quote, and I found an interesting quote about genealogy. I hope you like it too. You are our living link to the past. Tell your grandchildren the story of the struggles waged at home and abroad, of sacrifices made for freedom's sake. And tell them your own story as well, because everybody has a story to tell. And that's by George H.W. Bush. All our people. Usually I don't do many past presidents, but yeah.
Great.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I do have a very quick plug-in, the Pollinator Project. It's been really taking off very, very successfully, and a lot of legwork because it's the first time we're doing this. And with all those first things in place, how cool would it be if we could do it again next year, right? Because a lot of basics are there and it will be so much easier to do it again. But for that, we would probably have to apply for a district grant. And Gail was so friendly to send me a reminder of it too. And Lindy mentioned that she was not available, but there are 3 dates available to join a seminar for that. It's online. They do not happen to match my schedule, unfortunately, and not Lindy's schedule. But if anyone would be available either, so these are all Central Time things. Thursday, March 23rd, well, that's tomorrow, right? In the evening from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Central Time. Or Saturday in the morning, or Tuesday next week in the afternoon. Those are some times, and there's more. And you might have seen this in an email too from Kathy Hewitt, I believe, that has more information. Is there anyone who thinks they could attend? Just one person from our club is all it takes to attend and check the box. I did send an email that, guys, I don't know if we can do this, but we want to, right? So,
Olga, I have registered, but like for the seminar tomorrow night. But like I said, Joe and I are leaving very early Friday morning. So God
Yeah.
knows what'll happen tomorrow night. And my intention is to be there, but if there was a backup, that would be really wonderful. Reason being, we cannot apply for the grant unless we attend these meetings.
Yep, that's how it rolls. I remember attending last year, or was it 2 years ago already? No, last year. Anyway. Yeah. You know what?
time
I'll
is the
send
one on
out.
Tuesday?
Sorry.
Oh, I found it. I can attend the one on Tuesday, the 20th.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Fabulous.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. And if anything happens, let me know, but I'll be traveling and I'll check my email in the meantime. Wonderful.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Thank you for having
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Dave, for joining us. Is he still on?
Oh,
Don't-
yeah. I don't know.
Oh, it looks like he signed off.
And I'm sorry, I missed the introductions. Who was Dave?
Someone who found the link somewhere. He's in Nebraska's club and joined us.
Super fantastic. Great.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I didn't even know
Excellent.
there was a virtual Rotary. That's really cool.
There are several. Yep. Yep. There are several. And I know a very small town in the Netherlands called Lathrop, but not with an H in it.
Yep.
So I thought, would you be from there? That doesn't really sound like it.
I think it's from Lathrop, which is a town. It's in Yorkshire, England.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I guess that goes back to your explanation on the spelling and such.
Yep. But it could be they could have moved there and started that, like, you know what I mean?
Right. Who knows? Who knows? Wonderful. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye,
evening.
everybody.
Have a great
Bye
day.
bye.